August 8th, 2008. We had been going through a tumultuous time, uh, a lot of toxicity and mistrust and all the things. And this one particular day, I had been telling him for about 5 years, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. I would say it every day. And I think it was more so for me to prepare me than to let him know because he didn't care. So, on that particular day, I had just woke up and said, "Today's the day. It's it. I'm done." And I remember barricading the doors, and we had an altercation that morning. He went away, and then later that afternoon, my sister and I were preparing to pick kids to the state fair. And I was getting dressed. She had took the kids to get some food. And I heard somebody come in the house, but I thought it was them. And the next thing I know, I was spaced with what I can only describe as a beat. There was white matter coming from the mouth, green matter from the nose, very dark eyes, dilated, but no one's home because I'm talking and not getting a response. And that moment pursued into about 2.5 hours of me literally fist fighting over the gun. And in the process of fighting to get the gun from him, he twisted my arm, pointed the gun at my chest, and put the trigger in the gun. So I always say August 8 was the beginning of the end or the end to the beginning. One of the two. So that's a broad overview of what happened that day. But yeah, that was the start. Initially, I thought he was kid because let me lay some foundation. In our relationship, the aggressor had always been me. An aggressor, like if a week was passed, it was gonna be me. Like you know, pass a lick. We had been together 20 years, he had never put his hands on. Never ever asked. So this particular day, although I was terrified because I saw what I saw, I'm still in my head thinking he would never, because he hasn't ever. He would never do that. He would never. And so I thought he was kidding until he lifted me off my feet by my neck. Then I knew it was serious. And I laugh to, the audience, if you hear that chuckle, it's just simply because it's unbelievable, and I was just like, no, he's serious. And just kind of took the turn from there. Not up until that time, we had a spell of drug abuse. We were together about 20 years. About 9 years of that was high level drug. And so I was an angry addict. And so that's where that came from. So there were never signs on his part that he would ever do anything like this. But then again, when we talking being drug induced or influenced, right? People aren't always they're not in their right mind. And I'm not making excuses for him. We're over that. We're friends again now. Because we've always been friends. We were friends before we were together. We were best friends when we were together, and then we went through right after, like we hated each other. But now we're to the point, 10 years later, 12 years later, we're to the point of being able to be friends again. Like literally a couple weeks ago, he came over, max for hours, just laughing and talking. Power of forgiveness. That's a whole nother story. But so although the signs weren't there, they were, I think that the realization that it was over is what took him over the top. I don't think it was anything other than that. This is done for real. Like she's leaving. And we had never been 20. I've never threatened to leave. I mean, outside of me telling him in the last 5 years I'm leaving. But it was not like I would take the kids and leave. And we didn't do any of that. Everything was just kind of in a whirlwind. And in my head, when I'm thinking back on it now, it seems like it was just days. Boop, 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 everything happened. But it wasn't. It was so immediately after that incident, of course, police came and this Caucasian officer, I hear him in the basement telling my 14-year-old son who was in the door and saw it all, telling him sometimes mommies and daddies can't live in it. And when he came up the stairs, he told me at the time, he called me by my last name. He said, "Do you have some?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he looked at me and he said, "Leave and don't come back, or I'll be coming back to identify." And that moment made it real for me because even though it had happened, and my sister looked at me like I was crazy a few years after we were talking, and I was like, I think if nobody else had been in the house, I would stay. We would stay because I would have just it would have been like any other incident. It really didn't happen. Brush it under the rug and keep it moving. But when he said that he would have to identify my body, something shifted it. We left that night, went to my sister's house, and then the next day I came back. Because the state we were in, it's like you can't make a spouse move unless you go through the whole court process. So the kids and I went back home and we stayed upstairs. He stayed in the basement. I put all of the kids in one room behind me, and I laid in on the floor in the front room with Shop. So that was about a week of doing that. And in the process behind the scenes, I was already making calls to get an apartment, see how much it would cost to move, analyzing in the house what I could take, how we could get out safe, like all the things. And a couple things I'm thankful that my children were a little older so they could help. And then I had some amazing friends that were like, "What do you need? Do we need to back up to the corner and put some stuff in the trunk and pull up? Like, what do you need?" So having that support really helped after the aftermath. You know, everybody's there when it first happened, but it's like after it dies down, who's there? And so those are the two things that I can really remember. My children being older, and I told them, I said, "Don't ask me any questions. Like when I say moves, moves, and just do what I say." And they did. Like that morning that it was move day, I just woke up, took them, told everybody what to grab. We grabbed everything, left the house one time, threw it in the truck, pulled off. By the time he woke up, we were gone. He didn't know where, didn't know what, all of the things. But yeah, the after effect is crucial. And that in itself was a lot, right? It was hectic. I had one son that spun out of control and is still dealing with the aftermath today. You know what I mean? My daughters really kind of shut down. And then I have another son that kind of just stayed glued to me. We did the individual counseling, had to do the group counseling, did the family counseling, brought dad in. Like it was a lot. They all had their own emotions, like you said, but they weren't old enough to really articulate it, like what I'm feeling. I just know my mom and my dad are not together, and it's never been this way. So from the children we got, I think it was a lot of process in them trying to understand because when we split, the youngest was 12. The youngest was 12. The oldest was 17. So them in their adolescence, in their teen tween years, the hormones are aging. Now I'm doing all these things with my mom and dad. It was a lot. It became overwhelming, but not to the point of ever me feeling like I was hopeless because I knew that that was temporary and something else was coming. I just didn't know what or how, but I knew that it was. And so I moved in that belief in knowing something better is coming. You can do it. You can do it. Even if it seems like you're all alone, you can still do it. And I say that because I truly believe that a separation is a breeding ground for resilience. It is in the space where you get to stretch you, and at the same time, you get to change the things that you don't like, right? Part of my process, I began to write, and that's how I came into the whole coaching arena. I wanted to write a book, share the story, get it out of me, but also teach women how to begin to navigate in that change. And it all starts with you. So the first book was The Process of Change, a look at me. Because after that separation, I realized I didn't even know who I was. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. All I knew is that I was a mom, I was a wife, I was, in my position at the job, I was her. I was all of the things, but who is she really? So I had to go on that journey of let me look at me and see what it is. Who am I? What do I want? Because I always did what my parents said, left my parents, moved in with the husband, and then when we separated, that was my first time being alone, as an adult, being alone and having to depend on me 100% and me make all the decisions and me having to trust me in various areas. And that was scary as heck because I found out I didn't trust me. So how can I trust somebody else if I don't even trust me? So yeah, that was just a few things. And here's the truth of the matter is not only can you get through it, you'll come through it a lot stronger. Because here's the thing. When we're in relationships, most of us as women lose ourselves. And what I mean by that is our focus shift from what we were focused on at first to now it being about this mate. And then with the man comes the family. With the family comes all the other things. So now we're trying to be mindful of somebody else's emotional state, somebody else's, mental state, somebody else's well being, and another adult who we don't have any insight to what they're thinking. So then we begin to jump through these hoops trying to figure out how I can be the best me for them. When in essence, what we really should be doing, especially if you're by yourself and you don't have support, is go inward. That's where your strength comes from. When you spend time with you, no matter what you believe. I believe in God, but whether you call it universe, spirit, whatever other words are out there, that's what your inner being is. That's that core, that unction that you get when they say, "Oh, don't do that. Go this way. Ooh, don't touch that fire. It's hot. Ooh, don't walk out in that water. It's deep." That's that inner spirit that is talking to you. And when you begin to listen to it closely, because it will never lie to you. I don't care who has been in your life, what has happened. Your spirit will never lie to you. When it's like, "Ooh, I don't think I really should talk to him, but I like you." But your inner being is screaming, "Don't do that." That's because it really does know what's best for you and what's going to happen. So your inner spirit is your best friend. And when you listen to it, you will never grow, even though it might not feel good in the moment. So you may want to do the thing, whatever the thing is, but your spirit is telling you no. And you like, dang, but I really want to. But just know when you follow that guidance, there's always something better for you on the other side. Quick story. The 5 years I had been telling him I was leaving, right? I was hung up on the vows of it all, right? I grew up, you know, believing in marriage, the sanctity of marriage. So even though so many things were happening, I wasn't paying attention to my spirit and unction. Each time she said, "Move, move. It's time to go. It's time." But because I was so hung up on the vows, my feet wouldn't move. I wouldn't make the decision. I wouldn't take the extra step. So for that lady that's out there that is all alone, I'll say take the first step. If you know you want to leave and you're ready to go, start preparing. If it's saving $20 a week, if it is applying for apartments right now, even though I'm not moving for the next 6 months, if it is getting the pricing for the truck so that you will have it or the storage or whatever you have to do. But start making those moves now because the little actions that you take is going to create momentum. And before you know it, you will be living a whole new life. And like, wait a minute, how did I get here? It just takes one step. At some point, I got tired of seeing all the negative. And I'm like, you know what? It's over. And I think this is the shifting point for most men. When you come to the acceptance state of this is over, now what? When you get there, that's your pivot point. That's when you are then on the down slope. And I'm not saying down slope like it's going to be 1 week, 2 week. I don't know. It took me 10 years to be able to think about certain situations and not have emotion attached to it. So I always tell, ladies that as long as you were in the relationship, expect it to take that long to heal. I was in that relationship almost 20 years and it took me 10 to not have emotion attached to when we talk about things that has happened or things that were said or people that were involved in different situations. So give yourself some grace. Give yourself some grace. All the grace you shared all the years for all of his mishaps, give yourself extend that same grace to you as you go through this process. And your process won't look like anybody else's process. It won't feel like anybody else's process. But know that it's yours and you have the right to choose how you go. So what that looked like for me is paying attention to when we're having a conversation. Now I can tell when he finna shift into some nonsense, right? I just hear it. And I paid attention to things that he would say that would trigger me, that would make me get all riled up and angry because I noticed that he would do that on purpose, especially if he was trying to get a reaction from me. So that was step one, paying more attention to me than to him. Another thing that we did is have open and honest conversation. Like you did this is how I felt. This is, you know, put it all on the table. And we were able to have those types of courageous conversations without malice. You know what I mean? You know how sometimes people have conversation and it's a underlying, I really just want to see where you at, or I really just want to know what you're doing, or but when we were able to over the years, we would have spans of not talking. That was another thing. So that's three. The third thing is to have a span of not talking so that you can focus on self. And then when you come together, pay attention to those triggers. And I can feel when I'm about to get upset with him. And I'll say, you know what? I'll call you back, or I'll talk to you later, or whatever I have to say to end the conversation. So we end on a good note and not have to start over. Because what was happening is every time we ended with that raw, we had to start that process over of being able to openly and honestly communicate. Because now all I see is the old you. And so I don't like the old you. And so I'm not going to build you. Right. So we had those spans of not talking, spending focused on self, and having open communication. I would say those are the top three things that helped us. And I know people like, yeah, you didn't go to counseling. Yeah, we did. And I went to counseling on my own. I don't know if he after the family counseling, I don't know if he did it, but whatever he did has made us be able to, come together, be with our kids and grandkids, and it not be an issue. And one of the things that was really important to me is that both of us refrain from negative talk about the other to the children. Yeah, we neither of us. And me and the kids just had this conversation the other day, and my daughter was talking about one of her friends' situation, and she says, and I snapped. I turned and I looked, and I was like, I never said anything about y'all dad. And all of them was like, no, mom, you never did. Dad has never done that either. I was like, really? They were like, yeah, he never said anything bad about you. So I'm super grateful because that's not always the case. I'm super grateful that even though as bad as it got, we still had enough maturity to not, insert the children in the midst of our mess. So one of the most important part of that journey is learning to forgive yourself. So we say, forgiveness is for you, not for them, which is true. But it's easier to say, oh, I forgive them because you don't have to deal with them out of sight, out of mind. But when you dealing with you take you everywhere you go. So take some intentional time to forgive yourself for all the things, not just that relationship, not just the mistakes in that relationship. And I don't think of things as mistakes, they're just lessons. Either I get results or I learn a lesson. Those are the two things it is. So in that marriage, I learned some lessons. I learned a lot of lessons, good, bad, and indifferent. But the only way I think that I was able to reconcile and we're where we are now after the fact is because I was able to forgive me for making the decision, right? At 19, making the decision to be with this person, making the decision to have the kids, because we snowball it. So if you don't get nothing else out of this conversation, give yourself grace, forgive yourself, and spend time with you. Common denominator is you. So I have went on. I started the journey of digging into who I am, what I'm supposed. I'm like, Lord, you saved me from a gunshot. You saved me from a bullet in my chest. There must be a reason. What is it? Because now I'm listening. I don't have no distractions. The man not a distraction. The kids is they in 18, so they really not a distraction. They weren't bothering me. So I had a lot of time to be with me. And I just began to go on that journey and write, wrote the first book. The first series is The Process of Change. Volume one is a look at me. Volume two, love yourself, and then moving forward. Because I believe you don't look at yourself, and if you don't learn how to love you, you will repeat those same cycles. You're gonna repeat those same tests and learn those same lessons, go through those same trials to learn those lessons. But when you tap into you and begin to love on who you are at your core, then you can move forward. Then you can go by leaps and bounds. So after writing those books, I began to get speaking engagement. People started asking, "Ooh, can you come share your story with my women's group?" It started with women mints, right? And it just kind of snowballed from there. Went from women's ministry to other churches to people saying, "Oh, I'm having this event. Do you mind coming to have a few words? Can you share your story?" And it just has been rolling since. It started with the books, then it went into me being an independent publisher, rolled into me coaching, managing other book projects. Um, Full circle, just opened a business that is connected to the corporate world and what I used to do, and that is medical billing. So it kind of just allowed me. Let me tell you, the best part of Better Without Him is because that breakup allowed me to become Precious. Had I stayed, I would still just be the kid's mom and his wife. But because the breakup happened, I didn't have a choice but to focus on me. See, I got moved everything out of my way. He's like, okay, you keep asking me because I've been praying about what is my purpose? Why am I here? Like, what is this? And so he removed everything, and I didn't have a choice but to focus on it. So started writing, speaking, rolled into coaching, and now all I do mostly consult. I love sharing the story because I want women going through a breakup to understand it's not the end of it's the beginning. And for those out there that want to connect with me, I'm on all platforms as Precious S. Brown or One Prosperous One. And so you can connect with me on social that way or on my website, www.precioussbrown.com, or email me support@preciousbrown.com.